Now to the ongoing war in Ukraine. A critical deal allowing the nation to export grain via the Black Sea expires today, and Russia says it will suspend its role in that agreement. The truce was brokered last summer by Turkey and the United Nations and aimed to take pressure off the global food system by allowing grain from Ukraine to be exported safely. The deal was successful in bringing down prices of key grains. So checking on them in anticipation of maybe this deal having some problems. We've seen wheat that had been ticking higher in anticipation of the decision. Right now, it's little changed. The move all coming as Ukrainian media outlets reported that its forces were behind an attack on a key bridge that connects the Crimean Peninsula to Russia. Joining us now is Carlos Mera, Rabobank's head of the agricultural commodities market. So, Carlos, set the scene for us. Can you put this in perspective, how important this deal is and what the effect on grain prices could be?
Well, Ukraine is one of the major breadbaskets in the world. And the fact that the deal allowed 33 million tons of grains and oilseeds to be exported in the last year, that's a huge achievement. And that's one of the reasons why, for example, wheat prices have collapsed by almost 50% since the last year. Now, the deal was being delayed. Part of one of the prerequisites of the deal was that Russian inspections will take place before vessels will come into this corridor to pick up grains from the Odessa ports in Ukraine. Those inspections were delayed, so it wasn't working perfectly, but it was still working for the most part and allowing some exports to take place. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to have this deal in the foreseeable future, which means that all those grain oilseeds will need to move by alternative routes, which is either via the land borders in the EU, into the EU, or via the Ukrainian ports on the Danube, which are just across EU waters, which is a safe navigation route. However, either of those routes will involve much higher transportation costs, which means less money left for Ukrainian farmers.
And what are the implications of this for global grain supplies? Does this start to limit?
Yeah, to some extent. Well, we think most of the exportable surplus in Ukraine is going to flow via these alternative routes, but at a higher cost first. And there will be unavoidably some increase in domestic stocks in Ukraine because not all grain will move. But more concerningly, in the future, Ukrainian production might drop because farmers will get less money. They will probably have to sell below cost of production. And that means that agricultural production in Ukraine will tend to decline as things stand today, which is not great. It depends a little bit commodity by commodity, but we expect much more support for vegetable oils, especially cooking oils. And we expect as well more support for wheat prices. Wheat prices have already started to increase in the last few days, about 10-12% since Wednesday. Also a little bit corn prices as well. And that puts a lot of pressure, especially on underdeveloped countries that will have to import especially wheat, which is essential for human consumption, at higher prices and more dependent on Russian wheat exports. Russia is the largest exporter of wheat in the world, so they will have fewer options.
Carlos, a lot was made, obviously, when the war began about the effects on global agricultural markets. How much, but it also feels like that the world is sort of adjusted here. So, even if you get these sort of shocks to the system at this point, do you think it is more resilient than it was 2 years ago?
Generally, yes. I don't expect prices to go back to the highs we've seen when the war started and in the couple of months following the war, when we saw, for example, wheat prices at almost twice the amount where they are now. But certainly we expect a little bit more support in wheat, and we have to look at the situation and the macroeconomic situation of some poor countries, which has arguably deteriorated in the last year.
Carlos, I've got to ask you, Secretary of State Antony Blinken recently accused Russia of weaponizing this grain deal. Is there any potential for this deal being resurrected?
I think there's potential, but the conditions that Russia keeps mentioning, they're unpalatable for Western countries, like reconnecting Russian banks to the SWIFT system, for example. I think the West has been trying to give some allowances, maybe one branch of one bank to be reconnected, etc. But the position seems to be too far apart. Now, I understand President Erdogan will be speaking today with Vladimir Putin. There might be some developments. There might be some development, but as of today, position seems to be too far apart.
Carlos, thanks for joining us this morning and helping us understand this whole situation. Carlos Mera, Rabobank Head of the Agricultural Commodities Markets. Thank you.